South of the Border, West of the Sun by Haruki Murakami. Chapter 12. From then until the spring, Shimamoto and I saw each other almost every week. She would stop by one of the bars, more often than not the Robin's Nest, always after 9. She'd sit at the bar, have a couple of cocktails, and leave around 11. I'd sit beside her, and we'd talk. I don't know what my employees thought, but I didn't care. It was like we were at school together, and I didn't let what my school friends thought about the two of us concern me. Occasionally, she'd phone to invite me to have lunch. Most often, we'd arrange to meet at a cafe on Omotesando. We'd have a light meal, then walk. We'd be together for 2, at most 3 hours. When it was time for her to leave, she'd glance at her watch and then smile at me. "Well, I'd better be going," she'd say. I couldn't read any of the emotions behind that smile. Whether she felt sad or not at leaving, or maybe relieved to be rid of me, I had no idea. I couldn't even tell if she really did have to get home. Anyhow, during the couple of hours we were together, we hardly stopped talking. Not once, though, did our bodies come in contact. Not once did I put my arm around her shoulder, or even so much as hold her hand. Back on the streets of Tokyo, Shimamoto had her usual cool, attractive smile. No more the rush of violent emotions she had displayed on that cold February day in Ishikawa. The warm closeness born on that day was gone. As if by unspoken agreement, we never mentioned our strange little trip. As we walked side by side, I wondered what feelings she held in her heart, and where those feelings would lead her. Sometimes I looked deep into her eyes, but all I could detect was a gentle silence. As before, the line of her eyelids brought to mind the horizon, far off in the distance. At long last, I could understand Izumi's loneliness when we were going out together. Shimamoto had her own little world within her, a world that was for her alone, one I could not enter. Once, the door to that world had begun to open a crack, but now it was closed. I felt again like a helpless, confused 12-year-old. I had no idea what I should do, what I should say. I tried my best to stay calm and use my head, but it was hopeless. Everything I said and did was wrong. Every emotion was swallowed up in that radiant smile. "Don't worry," her smile told me. "It's all right." I was completely in the dark about Shimamoto's life. I didn't even know where she lived, or who she lived with, whether she was married or had been. The only thing I knew was that last February she had had a baby, which died the next day, and that she'd never worked. Still, she always wore the most expensive-looking clothes and accessories, which meant that she had a fair amount of money. That's all I knew about her. She was probably married when she had the baby, but I couldn't be sure. Thousands of babies are born out of wedlock every day, aren't they? As time passed, Shimamoto began to tell me a little about her junior high school and high school days. There being no direct connection between those days and her present life, she didn't mind talking about them. I discovered how terribly lonely she had been. As she grew up, she had tried her best to be fair to everyone around her, never to make excuses. "Start making excuses, and there's no end to it," she told me. "I can't live that kind of life." But things didn't work out well. Her attitude only gave rise to stupid misunderstandings, which hurt her deeply. Steadily, she shut herself away. Waking up in the morning, she'd vomit and refuse to go to school. She showed me a photograph taken when she started at high school. She was sitting on a chair in a garden with sunflowers in bloom around her. It was summer, and she had on denim shorts and a white t-shirt. She was gorgeous. Facing the camera, she was smiling broadly. Compared with her smile now, she looked a bit self-conscious. Even so, it was a wonderful smile, the kind of smile that, because of its very precariousness, affected people all the more. Certainly not the smile of a lonely girl spending each day in misery. Judging by this picture, I told her, I'd say you were the happiest girl in the world. She shook her head slowly. Charming lines appeared at the corner of her eyes. She looked as if she were recalling some far-off scene from the past. Hajime, you can't tell anything from photographs. They're just shadows. The real me is far away. That won't show up in a picture. The photograph brought a pain to my chest. It made me realize what an awful amount of time I had lost. Precious years that could never be recovered, no matter how much I struggled to bring them back. Time that existed only then, only in that place. I gazed at the photo for a very long time. What's so interesting about it? She asked. I'm trying to fill in time, I replied. It's 25 years since I saw you last. I want to fill in that gap, even a little. She smiled and looked at me quizzically, as if there was something weird about my face. It's strange, she said. You want to fill in that blank space of time, but I want to keep it all blank. Throughout junior high and high school, she never had a real boyfriend. She was a beautiful girl, so boys paid attention to her, but she barely noticed them. She went out with a few, but never for a very long time. Boys that age are very hard to like, you understand. Teenage boys are uncouth and selfish, and all they think about is getting their hand up a girl's skirt. I was so disappointed. I wanted what the two of us used to have. Yes, but when I was 16 I wasn't any different. Uncouth, selfish, and trying to get my hand up a girl's skirt. That was me in a nutshell. I guess it was better I didn't meet you then, she said, and smiled. Saying goodbye at 12, meeting again at 37. Maybe this is the best way for us after all. I wonder. Now you're able to think of a few things other than what's under a girl's skirt, aren't you? A few, I said. But if you're worried, maybe next time you'd better wear trousers. Shimamoto gazed at her hands, resting on the tabletop, and laughed. She didn't wear a ring, a bracelet and a new watch every time we met, and earrings, but never a ring. I didn't want to be a burden to any boy, she continued. You know what I mean. There were so many things I couldn't do. Going on picnics, swimming, skiing, skating, dancing at a disco. It was hard enough just to walk. All I could do was sit with someone, talk and listen to music, which boys at that age couldn't stand for very long, and I hated that. She drank Perrier with a twist of lemon. It was a warm afternoon in the middle of March. Some of the young people passing by on the street outside were wearing short-sleeved shirts. If I had gone out with you then, I know I would have ended up being a burden to you. You would soon have been fed up with me. You would have wanted to be more active, to take a running leap into the wide world outside, and I wouldn't have been able to endure it. Shimamoto-san, I said, that's impossible. I would never have been impatient with you. We had something very special, I can't explain it in words, but it's true. A special, precious something. She looked at me closely, her expression unchanged. I'm not some great person, I continued. I'm not much to brag about. I used to be pretty crude, insensitive, and arrogant, so maybe I wouldn't have been the right person for you. But there is one thing I am certain about. I never, ever would have been bored with you. That, at least, makes me different from other people you knew. In that sense, I am indeed a special person for you. Shimamoto's gaze shifted to her hands on the table. She lightly spread her fingers as if checking all 10 of them. Hajime, she began, the sad truth is that some things can't go backwards. Once they start going forward, no matter what you do, they can't go back to the way they were. If even one little thing goes awry, then that's how it will stay forever. Once, she phoned to invite me to a concert of Liszt piano concertos. The soloist was a famous South American pianist. I cleared my schedule and went with her to the concert hall at Ueno Park. The performance was brilliant. The soloist's technique was outstanding, the music both delicate and deep, and the pianist's heated emotions were there for all to feel. Still, even with my eyes closed, the music didn't sweep me away. A thin curtain stood between myself and the pianist, and no matter how much I might try, I couldn't get to the other side. When I told Shimamoto this after the concert, she agreed. But what's wrong with the performance? She asked. I thought it was wonderful. Don't you remember? I said. The record we used to listen to, at the end of the second movement, there was this tiny scratch you could hear. Putch. Somehow, without that scratch, I can't get into the music. Shimamoto laughed. I wouldn't exactly call that art appreciation. This has nothing to do with art. Let a bald vulture eat art up. It wouldn't bother me. I don't care what anybody says. I like that scratch. Maybe you're right, she admitted. But what's this about a bald vulture? Ordinary vultures I know about. They eat corpses, but bald vultures? In the train on the way home, I explained the differences in great detail. The difference in where they're born, their call, their mating periods. The bald vulture lives by devouring art. The bald vulture lives by devouring art. The ordinary vulture lives by devouring the corpses of unknown people. They're completely different. You are strange, she laughed. And there in the train seat, ever so slightly, she moved her shoulder to touch mine. The one and only time in the past 2 months our bodies had touched. March passed, and so did April. My younger daughter started going to nursery school. With the children away from home, Yukiko began doing volunteer work in the community, helping out at a home for handicapped children. Most of the time it was my job to take the kids to school and pick them up again. Whenever I was busy, my wife took over. Watching the children grow, day by day, I could feel myself aging. All by myself, regardless of any plans I might have for them, they were getting bigger. I loved my daughters, of course. Watching them grow up made me happier than anything. Sometimes, though, seeing them grow bigger by the month made me feel oppressed. It was as if a tree were growing inside my body, laying down roots, spreading its branches, pushing down on my organs, my muscles, bones, and skin, forcing its way outwards. It was so stifling at times that I couldn't sleep. Once a week I met Shimamoto, and daily I shuttled my daughters back and forth to school, and a couple of times a week I made love to my wife. Since I had started seeing Shimamoto again, I made love to Yukiko more often. Not out of guilt, though. Loving her and being loved was the only way I could hold myself together. "You've changed. What's going on?" Yukiko asked me one afternoon after sex. Nobody told me that when men reach 37, their sex drive goes into a higher gear. "Nothing's going on. Same old thing," I replied. She looked at me for a while and shook her head slightly. "Sometimes I wonder what's going on inside that head of yours," she said. In my free time, I listened to classical music and gazed out at Aoyama Cemetery. I didn't read as much as I used to. My concentration was shot to pieces. Several times I saw the young woman in the Mercedes 260E. Waiting for our daughters to come out of the school gates, we stood making small talk, the kind of gossip only someone living in Aoyama would comprehend. Advice about which supermarket you could park at easily and when, the latest on a certain Italian restaurant, which had changed chefs and now couldn't serve decent food, news about the Meiji-ya import store, which was having a sale on imported wine next month, and so on. Damn, I thought, I'd become a regular gossipy housefrau. But these things were all we had in common. In the middle of April, Shimamoto disappeared again. The last time I saw her, we were sitting in the robin's nest. Just before 10, a phone call came from my other bar, something I had to take care of right away. "I'll be right back, in 30 minutes or so," I told her. "All right," she said, smiling. "I'll read a book while you're gone." I rushed to deal with the problem, then hurried back, but she was no longer there. It was a little after 11. On the counter on the back of a matchbox, she had left a message. "Probably I won't be able to come here for a while," the note said. "I have to go home now. Goodbye. Take care." I was at a loose end for days. I paced around my house, wandered the streets aimlessly, and went to pick up my daughters early. And I talked to the Mercedes 260E lady. We went to a nearby cafe for a cup of coffee, gossiping as usual about the state of the vegetables at the Kinokuniya market, the fertilized eggs at the Natural House food store, the bargain sales at Miki House. The woman was a fan of Inaba Yoshi's designer wear, and before the season arrived, she ordered all the clothes she wanted from the catalogue. We talked too about the wonderful eel restaurant near the police station on Omotesando, which was no longer in business. We enjoyed talking. The woman was more friendly and open than she had appeared to be at first. Not that I was sexually attracted to her, I just needed someone, anyone, to talk to. What I wanted was harmless, meaningless talk. Talk that would lead anywhere but back to Shimamoto. When I ran out of things to do, I'd go shopping. Once, on a whim, I bought 6 shirts. I bought toys and dolls for my daughters, accessories for Yukiko. I stopped by the BMW showroom a couple of times to check out the M5. I didn't really plan to buy one, but I let the salesman give me his pitch. A few unsettled weeks like this, and I found myself able to concentrate again. I'm going nowhere fast here, I decided. So, I found a designer and an interior decorator to discuss remodeling the bars. They were overdue for a little redesigning anyway, and it was high time I did some serious thinking about how I ran my business. Just as with people, with bars, there's a time to leave them alone and a time for change. Being stuck in the same environment, you grow dull and lethargic. Your energy level takes a nosedive. Even castles in the air can do with a more fresh coat of paint. I started with the other bar, saving the robin's nest for later. I began by removing all its hyper-chic aspects, which, when you came down to it, were a pain in the backside. The whole point being to come up with an efficient, functional workplace. The audio system and air conditioning were due for an overhaul too, as was the menu, which I revamped drastically. I interviewed my employees and came up with a long list of suggested improvements. In great detail, I laid out to the designer my vision of what the bar should be, got him to draw up a plan, then sent him back to the drawing board to incorporate features that had popped into my head in the meantime. We repeated this process a number of times. I selected all the materials, had the contractors draw up estimates, readjusted my budget. I spent 3 weeks scouring shops throughout Tokyo in search of the world's greatest soap dispenser. All of this kept me extremely busy, but that, after all, was precisely what I wanted. May came and went. Then it was June. Still no Shimamoto. I was sure she had gone forever. Probably I won't be able to come here for a while, she'd written. It was this probably and for a while and the ambiguity inherent in them that made me suffer. Someday she might show up again, but I couldn't just sit around, resting my hopes and dreams on vague promises. Keep on like this, I thought, and I'll end up a blithering idiot. So I concentrated on keeping myself busy. I started going to the pool every morning, and I'd swim 2,000 meters without stopping, then go upstairs to the gym to do some weightlifting. A week of that, and my muscles started to rebel. Waiting at a red light one day, I felt my left foot go numb, and I couldn't let in the clutch. Finally, though, my muscles got used to the workout. Hard physical effort left no room to think, and keeping my body always in motion helped me to focus on the trivia of everyday life. Daydreaming was forbidden. I tried my best to concentrate on whatever I was doing. Washing my face, I thought about that. Listening to music, I was all music. It was the only way I could survive. In the summer, Yukiko and I often took the kids to our cottage in Hakone. Away from Tokyo in the countryside, Yukiko and the children were relaxed and happy. They picked flowers, watched birds with binoculars, played tag, splashed about in the river. Or else they just lay around in the garden, but they didn't know the truth. That on a certain snowy winter day, if my plane had been grounded, I would have thrown them all away to be with Shimamoto. My job, my family, my money, everything, without flinching. And here I was, my head still full of Shimamoto. The sensation of holding her, of kissing her cheek, wouldn't leave me. I couldn't drive the image of Shimamoto from my mind and replace it with my wife. Just as I could never tell what Shimamoto was thinking, no one had a clue to what was in my mind. I decided to spend the rest of our summer holiday finishing the remodeling. While Yukiko and the children were in Hakone, I stayed in Tokyo alone to supervise the work and give last-minute instructions. I'd swim in the pool, work out at the gym. On weekends, I'd go to Hakone, swim in the Fujiya Hotel pool with my daughters, and we'd all have dinner together. And at night, I'd make love to my wife. I was fast approaching middle age, yet had no extra fat to speak of, no thinning hair, Not a single white hair either. Exercise helped to keep the inevitable physical decline at bay. Led a well-regulated life, never overdo anything, and watch your diet. That was my motto. I never got sick, and most people would have guessed I was barely 30. My wife loved to touch my body. She touched the muscles on my chest and stomach, and fondled my penis and balls. Yukiko, too, was going to the gym to work out regularly, but it didn't seem to slim her down. I must be getting old, she sighed. My weight goes down, but this roll of flab is still here. I like your body just the way it is, I told her. You're fine the way you are. No need to work out or go on diets. It's not as if you're fat or anything. Which wasn't a lie. I really did like the softness of her body, with its bits of extra flesh. I loved to rub her naked back. You just don't understand, she said, shaking her head. You say it's all right for me to look the way I am now, but it takes every ounce of energy I have just to stay in the same place. An outsider would probably have said we had an ideal life. Certainly, I was convinced of it at times. I was enthusiastic about my work and was making a good deal of money. I owned a 4-bedroom apartment condo in Aoyama, a small cottage in the mountains of Hakone, a BMW, a Jeep Cherokee, and a happy family. I loved my wife and my 2 daughters. What more could anyone ask for? If, say, Yukiko and the children had begged me to tell them what they should do to be even better to me, to be loved even more, there was nothing I could have said. I could not imagine a happier life. But since Shimamoto had stopped coming to see me, I was stuck on the airless surface of the moon. If she had gone forever, no one remained to whom I could reveal my true feelings. On sleepless nights, I'd lie in bed and replay over and over in my mind that scene at the snowy Komatsu airport. Recall it enough times, and the memories start to fade, or so I thought. The more I remembered, the stronger the memories became. The word delayed flashing on the flight information board. Outside the window, the snow coming down hard. You couldn't see more than 50 yards. On the bench, Shimamoto sat still, hugging herself tight. Her navy duffel coat and scarf, her body with its mixed scent of tears and sadness. I could smell that scent. Beside me, in my bed, my wife breathed, quietly, asleep. She knows nothing. I closed my eyes and shook my head. She knows nothing. The abandoned bowling alley car park, melting snow in my mouth and feeding it to her. Shimamoto in the plane, in my arms, her closed eyes, the sigh from her slightly parted lips, her body soft and limp. She wanted me then. Her heart was open to me. Yet I held myself back on the surface of the moon, stuck in its lifeless world. And in the end, she left me, and my life was lost all over again. Sometimes I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and not be able to fall asleep again. I'd get out of bed, go to the kitchen and pour myself a whiskey. Glass in hand, I'd look down at the darkened cemetery across the way and the headlights of the cars on the road. The moments of time, linking night and dawn, were long and dark. If I could cry, it might make things easier. But what would I cry over? Who would I cry for? I was too self-centered to cry for other people, too old to cry for myself. Autumn finally arrived, and when it did, I came to a decision. Something had to give. I couldn't keep on living like this. End of chapter 12.